I'm really sorry about it. So I hope that will not repeat it today. So let me start from the first, the metal fatigue class. Okay. Professor, can I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. And please stop me then and there if you find any difficulty in seeing this slide or following my uh, language, please. Can you see my slide right now in a full screen?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So, Buatade, I'm Sudhakar, and I'm a researcher in UNASP, and I work under the supervision of Professor Ana Paula Russofini Clara. And today we are going to discuss about metal fatigue. So it's a very interesting topic. And I'm personally like this topic a lot because I worked, my entire PhD is based on metal fatigue. Just give me a moment, still the students are coming. Yeah. So metal fatigue, and you can see two pictures in the slide. So one picture is can see the daily day life. You can see some exercise equipment, some bicycle pedals, and maybe small instruments. You can find they all fractured. So all these fractures are attributed to the fatigue failure. Okay, that is one. A very common failures, you springs. These are all the very common, and it's not much economically. Also, it is not. It won't make much effect. At the same time, you are seeing this kind of failures daily day life. Okay, so the fatigue is also contributing in this kind of failure. And at the same way, you can find another photograph in the bottom, which is aircraft which is failed due to a catastrophic fatigue failure, and almost 520 valuable human life lost in 1985 Japan. Just imagine. So this kind of two extreme failures can be caused by fatigue. Okay, such a common phenomena, failure phenomena is metal fatigue. That's what I tried to explain in this slide. Okay, so let me give you a proper definition of a fatigue. What is fatigue? If I want to say in one line, it is a time delayed fracture of materials subjected to a cyclic stress below that causing the plastic yielding or tensile failure. Okay, so why I have highlighted below that causing the plastic yielding or tensile failure is, just imagine as a design engineer, as a common layman, what is a primary objective of me for me to choose a material? I will choose a material which is having a good yield strength, or yield strength which is more than the service load which it can face. Okay, that's what is a primary objective of a design engineer to select a material. But fatigue can cause a failure when a material is subjected to a load which is well below its yield strength. So that's a very insidious and significant part to note, okay, about fatigue. And similarly, it will not happen immediately. It is a time delayed process. Okay, so if I it, the fatigue the failure will grow day by day, and it will fail suddenly without any warning. Okay, that is also another important thing which you have to note. Just give me a moment. Yeah. Actually, students are coming one by one, so I have to go back and allow them in. That's what is time taking. Okay, that's what is the definition is a time delayed fracture of materials subjected to cyclic stresses below that causing the plastic yielding or tensile failure. Okay, so fatigue is a natural consequence of the inherently stochastic loading condition of a structure or a component. It's a natural consequence. Okay, so if I keep on do that, then naturally the fatigue will happen. I said, I hope you all remember, I've given one example. So I am talking right now, okay, at a pace, at a level which is comfortable to me. That's no problem, okay. I can talk for another 1 hour, there is no problem. I can even talk for another 2 hours at this pace, at this loudness, there is no problem. What if I keep on talking for 24 hours at the possible pace and loudness? Even at the possible pace and the loudness, I will feel tired. Okay. So my vocal cord will feel the strain. Okay. That's what is happening to the metal also. That's what they are trying to say. It's a natural consequence. Okay. And the term fatigue is borrowed from a human reaction of tiredness due to repetitive work. Obviously, the fatigue is not only for the metal, fatigue is also applicable for the human, right? That's what we need vacations. Yeah. So in addition to the repetitive loading, we there are some other factors also initiate the fatigue failures. One is stress concentration, corrosion, temperature change, temperature fluctuation also cause fatigue failure, and then residual stresses can initiate the fatigue failure. These are all the other possible initiation categories. Okay. The importance of fatigue. This is another important thing because we know what is fatigue right now, and we want to know why we should learn the fatigue. So what is so important in fatigue? Let's see one by one. Mechanical failures due to, just give me a moment. Yeah. So mechanical failures due to fatigue have been the subject of over 150 years. People are working on it. Okay. The first study on fatigue evaluation is reported by Euler. We will see what is a contribution of Euler and what is called the Euler curve. Everything we'll see in the later slides. But the very first study systematically engineer approached fatigue failure, and he just proposed a evaluation procedure for analyzing the fatigue is done by 1850. Okay, so just imagine over 150 years people are working in it. Okay, and almost 50 to 90% of entire mechanical failure is due to fatigue. Just imagine, whatever the failure happen, there is a chances of 90% chances of it could be because of the fatigue. Okay, so the annual cost is related to fatigue of materials in the US economy is alone 3% of its GNP. 3% of GNP is only because of fatigue. Okay, fatigue is the most common failure in all field of engineering. It is not only for the mechanical people, it is for automobile people, it is for aeronautical people, and it is also for the biomedical people. And even, for example, in biomedical application, if there is any implant get wear out or it get failed due to the repetitive loading over a period of time, the the surgery or resurgery, what do you want to say, the resurgery is a very painful process for a patient. Okay, and it is mostly it is unsuccessful also. So again a person came. Yeah. Okay. So it is not only for the mechanical engineering, it is common for all field of engineering. That's my point. Then a fatigue failure is particularly insidious because it occurs without any obvious warning. That is another important thing. In India, I don't know about Brazil. In India, when we travel a lot, we could find lot of lorries. That means big trucks which is parked in the road. In the mid of the road, you can see the axle get cut. Okay, so axle breakdown would be there. And why that axle was breaking down? And we all the engineers would have worked on selecting the material, and there is no overload also because the lorry is not immediately failing. Okay, so something is happening to the axle over a period of time. Suddenly it is getting failed, and the driver don't know about it, and no one knows about anything. Without any preparation, that failure will happen. If it is happened in a truck, then there is no problem. The truck will stand in between the road. If it happened in the aircraft, just imagine, we cannot stop the aircraft in between the sky. Okay, so that's what important and very importance of the fatigue is. Then let's see some examples around, and there are very common examples you can find as is shown in the very first slide: door springs, tennis racket, electric bulb, paper clips. Okay, these are all the very common components which undergoes fatigue failure. Some complex components also there, like automobile steering linkage, engine connecting rod, ship propeller shafts, pressurized airplane fuselage. That is a very important and interesting topic. It's pressurized airplane fuselage. So what is happening now? The very first failure is by aircraft, which is a jetliner. So initially, what happened? Just give me a moment, and this became. Yeah. The very first jetliner faced this problem because for a jetliner, the cruising altitude is different, and for a normal Cessna type of aircraft or a turbo propeller kind of aircraft, the cruising altitude is different. So when the very first jetliner was fully pressurized, okay, so when it is fully pressurized, the entire circumference of the fuselage will be subjected to a load. Okay, so when the flight is on parking, when it is parked, it will face one load, and when it is in taxiing, it will face another load, and when it is rising up to the altitude, it will face another. Like that, there will be a variation of load. Okay, so because of that kind of load, there are many accidents happen. Okay, so this is one fine example, which is pressurized airplane fuselage, then landing gear, hip replacement processes. That's what I was explaining you before. So these are all the complex components which face a fatigue failure. Okay, so let's see what are all the steps involved in fatigue failure. Obviously, fatigue failure means there should be a crack. That crack should grow, and finally the entire component should fail. This should be any layman can say. It's a very common perspective. So the crack should nucleate. That nucleated crack should grow, and then it should coalescence. That means all the cracks should join together. That should reduce the cross-sectional area, and the material will fail suddenly. Okay, that's what is the three steps are. Let me go one by one. And crack nucleation is a very important and very critical stage in fatigue. It's least understood also. There are very many theories are evolving, or many theories are existing on crack nucleation. So one thing is, in all materials, there are regions of local inhomogeneity that result in local softenings or surface flaw that cause local stress concentration. I hope you all know what is stress concentration. And stress concentration is a place where the stresses are enormously increased because of the geometrical discontinuity. Okay, that's called stress concentration. So, okay, so the second thing is the inhomogeneous plastic flow occurring at a microscopic level. I'm talking about a very microscopic level. I'm not talking about the entire component. I'm just talking about a microscopic level. Okay, so such flows can take place even when a structure is elastically stressed. Just imagine like this: a material is subjected to a 700 MPa. Okay, 700 MPa of fluctuating stresses. Okay, the range is 700 MPa, but the material's yield strength is 1200 MPa. Okay, fine. So everyone will feel, okay, there is no problem because we are subjecting the material to 700 MPa alone. So, but the material can withstand 1200 MPa. That's what is the common perspective, common perception. But what is happening if there is a stress concentration, if there is a flaw in the surface? So what will happen at the tip of the flaw? There will be a huge multiplication of the stress. Okay, if you go to the fracture mechanics, you can easily you can appreciate this. Okay, you can see a lot of images how the stress is getting concentrated, everything. So we don't want to go over there right now. We will see. Just imagine like this. Okay, so what is happening at the tip of the flaw, at the tip of this crack, the stress will get multiplied, and the stress felt will be in 2000 or 3000 MPa. It will be roughly about 5 times of the far field stresses. Okay, then it will be that particular in a microscopic region, it will be the stress will be around 2000 to 3000 MPa. Then what will happen? Definitely there will be atomic bond breakage and the crack will propagate. That's what is happening. So that's how the crack nucleation is happening. Then if I want to say in a slip bands and other stuffs, let me see you on another perspective. I will tell you on another perspective. An important structural features which appears to be unique for the fatigue friction is ridges and grooves on the surface. This ridges and grooves I'm talking in an atomic level, not in a, you cannot find it, you cannot see that in your normal fatigue specimen. When you carefully examine the fatigue specimen with the electropolishing and other, in your normal eyes also you cannot see, in your naked eyes. It is a proper microscopical observation, you can find these ridges and grooves. And this is kind of, it is not, you cannot find this feature with the naked eyes. I'm just taking, it's a conceptual understanding only, I'm showing it to you. Okay, the slip planes or slip bands are arranged in this way. Okay, so this feature is unique for the fatigue. Just imagine if it is not an alternating load, if it is a uniaxial loading, then you cannot find this kind of up and down, away and in. That means extrusion and intrusion won't be there. There will be a proper step kind of arrangement will be formed if it is uniaxially loaded. Okay, just imagine like that. You just imagine like a cards arranged. Okay, one after another. Like that, you just imagine. If I am pulling it in one direction, definitely there won't be in and out. Okay. If I pull in opposite direction like this, can you see my hands? Okay, just give me a moment. Okay, the camera is not on. Okay. Am I fast? Are you following me?
No. Okay. But
okay.
No full screen.
No, Professor, please.
No full screen.
Full screen. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Okay. Is that fine?
Okay, now.
Yeah. So this kind of arrangement will be formed only for the cyclic loading, only for the fatigue kind of process. Okay, I think you can see my hands right now. Just imagine a slip planes are arranged one after another. Okay, so if I apply a load uniaxially, a monotonic loading, what will happen? That will form kind of steps kind of thing. Okay, it won't be in and out. When I apply a uniaxial like cyclic loading, I will apply like this. Okay, when I'm applying like this, so some cards will come out, some cards will go inside, some cards will, like that it will happen. Okay, you can imagine it. I think when you imagine it, you can appreciate it. Okay, so that's what the formation will be formed, and this formation is nothing but slip band extrusion and slip band intrusions. Okay, so this is another microstructural feature of the fatigue crack nucleation. Okay, so this surface protrusion or surface structural features are the origin of persistent slip bands. Okay, this PSBs. Why I'm talking very keenly, very important. Why I'm giving more importance to this PSBs, because this PSBs are the embryonic fatigue crack. That is the birthplace of the fatigue crack. Okay. So it's an embryonic fatigue crack, since they open into wide cracks on the application of the small tensile load, tensile strains in a far field. That means in the away. If you apply a very small tensile stress also, there will be, if something happened and if that intrusion and extrusions have happened, and if that will become a stress concentration area, and then the crack will get initiated. Is that fine? Do you have any doubt in this?
No.
Good. Okay. So this is how the crack gets nucleated. And once the crack gets nucleated, so the crack is nucleated because of the slip bands. Okay. So definitely the initial stage of the crack will not be in the direction perpendicular to the applied stress. That's what is my second point is. Let's go to the crack growth right now. The stage 1 crack so formed in a direction dictated by the plasticity, not by the externally applied load. Okay, so just give me a moment. Yeah. So can you see my pointer right now?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is the first stage of crack, which follows the plasticity, not the applied load. Okay, so the plasticity will be dominated in the crack propagation direction. So once the critical length is reached in the crack in the stage 1, it will take a direction which is perpendicular to the applied load, which is supposed to be natural. Okay, this one is everyone can answer. How the crack will propagate? It will propagate perpendicular to the applied load. That's what is a common perception is. But the crack growth is divided into two. One is stage 1 crack growth, stage 2 crack growth. Stage 1 is dictated by the plasticity. Stage 2 is perpendicular to the applied load. That's what is a crack growth is all about. And fatigue crack nucleated and grow as a result of cyclic stresses. That is very common. So it is because of the cyclic stresses that grows. It needs some energy, right, for the growing. So when you apply a cyclic load, then the crack will grow. So during the slow growth process, the crack advances rate relates to the frequency of the stress or strain cycle. So if the frequency is very low, that means how many cycles you apply. If it is very low, then the crack growth will also very low. If the frequency is too high, like 15 hertz or 20 hertz, that means 20 cycles per second. That's what is 50 hertz and 20 hertz. If you do in that rate, then the crack growth will be too high. Then crack coalescence and fracture. That is a final. So that is the final stage. So what is happening in the final stage? We all know final stage is nothing but the fracture. Why that fracture is happening? We were talking about a crack initiation. We were talking about the crack growth. All this crack growth, the grown crack will get coalescent, will get combined, and then that will, as a result of the combination, what is happening? The cross-sectional area is reduced. Okay, because it is get separated. So when the crack is propagating, it is creating two new surfaces, so that or in other words, it is separating the entire component. That's how the crack will grow, obviously. Okay, so what is happening here? After it is grown, then the length of the crack is increased. The cross-sectional area is reduced. When the cross-sectional area is reduced, the component or the material is not able to withstand the load. Okay, then the material will get failed, obviously. That's what it's trying to say. It's slow crack growth is interrupted by a final frost fracture resulting from the inability of the cross-sectional area to sustain the maximum tensile load. So this is how the crack initiate, this is how the crack grow, and this is how final fracture happen in the fatigue phenomena. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see what are the important parameters of the fatigue. Okay. So in order to quantify the fatigue, in order to evaluate the fatigue, I need to create some parameters to represent it. Am I right? So I cannot say directly, I cannot say, I know what is fatigue right now. I know how it starts, how it grows, how it fails, everything. I know the mechanism also. But I need to know how the fatigue evaluation is represented. I need to know how the material's fatigue can be measured. Okay, so for measuring the fatigue, we need to establish some parameters. So these are all the parameters which is commonly used for the stress control fatigue analysis. There are many types of analysis. Okay, so what we are very much concerned as of your syllabus is concerned is stress control fatigue analysis. In the stress control fatigue analysis, we are very much worried about maximum stress, minimum stress. So how maximum stress, you all know, if it is tension, we give a positive sign. If it is compression, we give a negative sign. The maximum you go in positive is nothing but the maximum stress, or in terms of magnitude and the sign. And similarly, in terms of magnitude and the sign, if it there will be a minimum stress also. So I need a maximum stress and a minimum stress. Then only I can talk about the cyclic stresses. Okay. If I have a maximum stress and mean stress and a cyclic stress, then obviously you can imagine a sinusoidal wave. Okay, so this sinusoidal wave has a maximum stress and a minimum stress. Another important thing is a mean stress, about which the maximum and minimum is reached. That is another important thing. Okay, so right now you know what is maximum stress, you know what is a mean stress, sorry, minimum stress, and you know what is a mean stress. So what is the relationship for the mean stress is mean stress is equal to sigma max plus sigma minimum divided by 2. That means about which the maximum and minimum is reached. Okay, that is called the mean stress. Then stress range. So how far the stresses are going here and there. So it is nothing but sigma max minus sigma minimum, and amplitude stress is nothing but the sigma max minus sigma minimum divided by 2. That means from mean stress how much it is going up. That is nothing but the amplitude stress. And stress ratio is also another important parameter to mention. It is sigma minimum divided by sigma max. That is called stress ratio, which is R. Okay. Thank you. So let's start right now. You know what are all the parameters of the fatigue, and right we are going to see what are all the type of fatigue cycles are used for the evaluation. The very first cycle, you can see it's a very common cycle, which is -1, a fully reversed cycle, which is nothing, which is represented by R is equal to -1. When R is equal to -1, when the sigma minimum and sigma max are equal in magnitude and opposites in sign. That means sigma minimum is 700 MPa, means sigma maximum is 700 MPa, sigma minimum is -700 MPa, then R is equal to sigma minimum divided by sigma maximum, then obviously it will be -1. Okay, so load fluctuates from sigma max to sigma minimum amplitude, and it is symmetric about the zero stress level. That is another important thing you have to know. Okay, so here the sigma mean, that means mean stress will be 0. So you can go from upside down, downside up, anyway. If you apply in the formula, you will get all these answers. Okay, so fully reversed is nothing but R is equal to -1, sigma mean is equal to 0. And repeated cycle. So where the sigma minimum is not equal to 0, that means sigma mean is not equal to 0. I'm very sorry. Mean is not equal to 0. That means sigma max and sigma minimum stresses are asymmetrically related to the zero stress level. Okay, it is asymmetrically related. In the fully reversed condition, is symmetrically related. And the final one is random cycle. Stress level may vary randomly in any frequency. There is no constant, what is it? A stress ratio. There is no symmetric also. That is called a random cycle. Mostly aircrafts will face this kind of random cycle only. Okay. For laboratory testing, we mostly use the fully reversed or repeated cycle. Okay, but in a real life scenario, in the aircraft and other components, mostly the random cycle will be existing. Yeah. So we'll see what is a Euler curve is, which is nothing but the SN curve we usually call. This is a very common representation of the fatigue behavior of the material. It is a very common method to represent the fatigue behavior of the material. Okay. In 1850, a German engineer, August Euler, developed a methodology to test the fatigue and represent the results. It is developed in 1850. The engineering fatigue data is usually plotted as SN curve. S stands for the stress and N is the number of cycles to failure. Give me a moment. So S is nothing but the stress and N is nothing but the number of cycles to failure. So X is always plotted in an N logarithmic scale because we work, that means the fatigue engineers work in the millions and millions of cycles. Okay, they will not work in 1 or 2 or 10 or 15 cycles. They will go up to 7 million and maybe 5 million cycles they will work. So we cannot represent that much number of cycles in a normal x-axis. So that we always go for the logarithmic scale. Okay. So the stress plotted could be one of the following. It could be a amplitude stress or it could be a maximum stress. There is no problem. And each plot is having a constant mean stress and R ratio. The mean and R ratio will be constant for all the for one particular SN curve. Typically, the stress value is chosen between which is lesser than the yield strength. It should be, because for high cycle fatigue life, we always choose maybe around 0.6% of yield strength, maybe around 0.6 to 0.7% of 0.7% of yield strength we'll choose as a first stress level. Okay, then only we'll get more number of cycle. If it is getting more number of cycle, means that means if it is greater than 10 power 5 cycle, then it comes under the category of high cycle fatigue testing. So it should be noted that nominal stress is lesser than the sigma y, but microscopically plastic, that's what I have explained to you before, how the plasticity is occurring locally. Okay, starting with the stresses of 2/3 of the, that's what I said, the 2/3 of the statistic. Then this one, I think you can read this. Low cycle fatigue means when the number of cycles is in between 10 power 4 to less than 10 power 4 cycle, then that comes under the category called low cycle fatigue. In the low cycle fatigue testing, we will choose higher stress range. It will be near to yield strength will go. Okay, even beyond that also we may go. Okay. So what is the immediate output of the SN curve? That's what we are going to see right now. So we know what is SN curve right now, how it is plotted, and what are the x-axis and y-axis, everything we saw right now. And we are going to see right now what you're going to get immediately out of, or as an end product of SN curve, what you're going to get. That is nothing but the endurance or fatigue limit. The coordinates are sigma A in linear scale and NF, the same thing, and NF increases as sigma A decreases. Obviously, if I increase the amplitude stress, the number of cycles will get reduced. Am I right? So this how the SN curve looks like, a typical SN curve looks. So stress amplitude is plotted here, and a cycle of failures, that means N number of cycles is placed here. Okay, if I start the fatigue testing here at this range, that means stress amplitude, for example, maybe around 700 MPa, I am starting the SN curve testing. So what is happening? By 10 power 4 cycle itself, the material is getting failed. Just give me a moment. So what is happening? By 10 power 4, the material is getting failed. So I'm just making a point here. Similarly, I'm reducing the stress right now to 600 MPa. So for 600 MPa, so what is happening? It is going up to 10 power 5 cycle. Okay. Similarly, but after it is, just imagine like here it's about 350 MPa. Okay. So for a 350 MPa of stress amplitude, I can find the material is not failing at all below the 350 MPa. Okay, so below this 350 MPa, for 100 MPa, 200 MPa, 250 MPa, there is no failure according to this graph. Okay, so that is called a fatigue limit. So below which the failure is not supposed to happen. Okay, so that is a fatigue limit for one kind of material. This green line is for only one kind of material. This blue line is for the another type of material. Some material will exhibit SN curve in this fashion, and some material will exhibit the XN curve in this fashion. Okay, so over here fatigue limit is explicitly absorbed or shown. Over here it is not so. So what you have to do in this kind of SN curve, if I want to know the fatigue life of S1, that means S1 for a stress of S1, I want to know how long the material can sustain. Then I can get that information from this curve. For the SN stress, you can find the fatigue life of the stress SN. It is coming around 10 power 5. 10 power 5 cycles. Similarly, if I want to know the stress fatigue strength at 10 power 8 cycle, then I have to go reverse. So I have to start from here. So for this particular number of cycle, how much fatigue strength the material will have, material should have, is nothing but here, a fatigue strength at N1 cycle. This how the two type of SN curve will be there for different kind of material. This how we have to infer the useful information from this kind of slides, the curves. Are you clear? Is that fine? Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So whatever I said right now, it is written here. I guess I have shared the PPT. Please have a look at it. Okay. fatigue limit is about 40% of the tensile strength of steel when the limit is obtained. That's what is. Just 40% of the tensile strength only the material can withstand for n number of cycles. Just imagine. Then what is the factor of safety you have? So I cannot, so maybe if it is 700 MPa, maybe around 300 MPa, the material can withstand n number of cycles. Okay, that's what we are trying to say here. This is another fine example. This is also for mild steel, it will be like that. And for aluminum alloy, it will keep on decreasing. As per graphically, there is no fatigue limit at all for the aluminum alloy. But for the mild steel, there is a fatigue limit below which the material will not fail for n number of cycles. You know, as per the recent research, there is no fatigue limit is existing. This is all for the theoretical, like for initial stage of fatigue analysis. Okay, but we are dealing only with high cycle fatigue, low cycle fatigue. There is new phenomena called gigacycle fatigue. That means beyond 10 power 8 cycle, beyond 10 power 10 cycle, they are working on it. So what they found is at one sort of time, the material will get failed because of the fatigue. There is no fatigue limit is exactly existing. Okay, but as per your test book, it is there, and this is a theory. Okay. So types of fatigue testing we are going to see right now. So what are all the types of fatigue testing? As I said before, we are working only on the stress control fatigue. So in this stress control fatigue, the very first proposal by the Wooler itself, stress control fatigue only. So the material testing is SN curve. How we are going to get the SN curve? The data for the SN curve is nothing but the fatigue testing. Okay, so there are many ASTM standards are available. One important ASTM standard is ASTM E466, a standard practice for conducting force controlled constant amplitude axial fatigue test of metallic materials. Okay, so what is the information you can get from this is a sample dimension you can get. That's a very important information you can get out of it. So sample dimension is usually we use a hourglass specimen. Hourglass, you all know how it looks like. No? It's like a eye section, kind of eye section. Okay, so in that hourglass specimen, what should be the grip diameter, what should be the test section length, diameter, everything. This proposition is given in this ASTM E466 standard. Okay, so this is a very first apparatus which is developed by Wooler in order to represent the fatigue behavior of the material. Okay, so it is a rotating cantilever beam fatigue testing machine used by the Wooler. So a pair of rotating test specimens subjected to cantilever bending. You can see the two specimens here. Yes, it's nothing but the specimen. So what has happened? The specimen, one end it is connected to the spindle, which is rotating. The other end is connected to the constant load using the spring, which is nothing but the P. Okay. So what I'm doing here, I'm subjecting a specimen to a bending as well as rotation at the same time, simultaneously. Okay, so what will happen if I do so? Each and every point of the specimen will experience a stress which is equal and opposite in the magnitude. That means it will experience a tensile load as well as a compressive load. Did you get my point? If that particular region of the specimen is in the top side, it's in the top side, then it will experience a tensile load. When that particular point which is in the top, which comes to the down due to the rotation motion, then that particular point will experience a compressive stress. Okay, the tensile stress and compressive stress will vary in between equal numbers. That means minus 400 MPa to plus 400 MPa. Again, from plus 400 MPa, it will go to minus 400 MPa, like this, when it is rotating. Did you get my point? To the pen?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So this how the fatigue test is performed. Okay. So when I do this fatigue test, obviously you all know the stress ratio is -1 because the load is not varying here. So sigma max and sigma minimum will be equal and opposite in sign, and that will be oscillating with about the zero mean stress. Because at the middle, the stress will be zero. In the core of the specimen, the stress will be zero. Fine. Okay. So it is a cantilever beam. I hope you can recollect how the cantilever beams stress bending moment and shear stress is varying. So it will be gradually varying right from the free end. It will be varying. Okay. So this how the shear force and bending moment is distributed in the cantilever kind of bending fatigue test. Okay. So it is also a bending fatigue test, rotating bending fatigue test. But here the setup is totally different. Over there it is cantilever bending. Over here it is a 4-point bending. So if you can draw, just give me a moment. Yep. If you can draw free body diagram for this setup, you can find like this. So there will be two reaction forces here. So there will be two reaction forces like this. Okay. So if I draw, what is a very important thing here? If I draw a shear force and bending moment diagram, the shear force will be 0 for the entire middle section. It will be 0. For the bending moment will be constant. Okay. So this is the very important difference between the shear force, that means the cantilever beam, and the rotating beam fatigue testing using the 4-point bending setup. Okay. So the two bearings in the near, that's what I explained here. So specimen rotates, the two outside this provide the support, and hanging weight usually provides the constant force. In this 4-point bending setup, a constant bending moment and a 0 shear stress over the length of the specimen will be felt. Okay, so it is unlike the previous experiment. Fine. Have any doubt?
No.
Okay, thank you. So this is a 4-point bending fatigue test, but here the rotation is not imposed. Here it is a just bending. Okay, just we are going to do a bending over here. Yeah. So this particular test is performed by me in France during my PhD. So what I've done is the specimen is laser pinned, actually surface modified. Okay. The surface modified specimen, I've kept it upside down so that the modified surface should face the tension in this case. Okay. So here the bottom end will face the tension and the above position will face the compression when I supply the load. Okay. That's what has happened. So this is 4-point bending fatigue test. The other one is tension fatigue. I hope you would have come across this particular instrument, which is a universal testing machine, which is this particular test is also performed by me during my PhD. This particular test is done in India. So this particular equipment is available in my previous university. So this is how the specimen looks like. So it is a hourglass specimen, and this particular specimen dimensions are dictated by the ASTM E466 standard. Okay, so based on that only the specimen is designed. So once the specimen is designed, we will clamp the specimen inside these two jaws, and then we'll impose a cyclic loading upon it. And there will be a system which is located here, this area. So the entire operation, the number of cycles, everything will be controlled by the system, and it will create a SN curve for us. Okay, this is how the tension fatigue will work. So just give me a moment. This is a fatigue testing. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Viva todos os dias a experiência suprema em café. Com a máquina de café expresso Latte Go.
Rotating beam fatigue testing systems were first developed in the mid-1800s by a German railroad engineer named August.
So you can see the constant load, which is down. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wohler. He
Yes,
designed
yes.
to test railroad car axles and investigate axle brake failures. The principles upon which that machine was developed still apply today. ADMET's rotating beam tester features two spindles that are simply supported and generate a true bending moment. The system features a collet-style specimen holding system and a dead weight hanger below, which applies the bending force to the specimen. The drive motor is capable of generating up to 2,000 RPM. On the back, there is a limit switch which causes the spindle to shut off at specimen failure. The machine is controlled by our EP2 digital controller, which indicates both speed and number of revolutions during testing. The electrical panel is below. This particular machine is wired for 110 volt AC. Before installing the specimen into the machine's collet chucks, make sure that the red emergency stop button on top of the EP2 is engaged, ensuring the drive spindle motor is turned off. After removing the safety shield, insert the sample into the drive side and use the provided wrench set to tighten it. Then, secure the sample in the non-drive spindle, again using the wrenches to tighten. Once the sample is properly tightened into the chuck, now you will need to apply a specific amount of weight to the hanger to generate the required bending stress. Weight is installed on the hanger. You are ready to enable the machine and enter the desired RPM and number of revolutions to test. Is off. Release the... You can set here, pressing the green start button. Previous tests by pressing the tear test.
That's it. It broke.
The sample broke, and upon sample breaking, the limit switch on the back side of the spindle drive motor was activated, and the system was shut off.
Yeah, this how the rotation bending fatigue test will work, and this is a tension fatigue.
Fatigue test. Many everyday items are not loaded uniformly, but rather guaranteed when clothes exert a large number of rapidly changing tensile and compressive forces. Back, almost load-free, are under load again with the rhythm of pedaling. The spokes, the pedals, even the individual link. Other examples show.
From here only I've taken that image.
We intend to measure the fatigue strength of a frequently used steel in our laboratory. Hot rolled steel rod.
This is a different setup. This is a different setup, and over here the specimen is kept in a horizontal way. Here the specimen is not kept in a vertical way. So
suitable specimen. The shoulder-shaped ends have been designed for safe gripping. The actually tested region is cylindrical with a diameter of 6 millimeters. The material tester goes to the workshop to get 10 specimens manufactured from the rods, not just one. All of the specimens are as identical as possible.
Yeah, the surface finish should be also identical. The surface finish should also be identical. Okay, you cannot take a specimen which is having a different kind of surface finish. One specimen is polished, another one is not polished, and one is polished with a 200 micron sheet, and the other one is polished with 300. Even that makes a difference.
All specimens ready for use and picks out the first one. He mounts the specimen carefully and securely into the fatigue testing machine. Together with 2 half shells, he inserts one end of the specimen into the right specimen. As he mounts the preparation is now complete. The material tester then selects the appropriate test parameters on the control computer. He intends to load the first specimen alternately with a tensile force of 7 kilonewtons and a compressive force of 7 kilonewtons. The mean force is 0. A click on the start button and the testing machine begins to stress the specimen periodically.
See, you can see that.
Our fatigue testing machine is equipped with a mechanical resonance drive. The specimen is connected at its left grip via a load cell to the machine frame. At the right grip, a spring is mounted, and there in turn, a mass. An imbalance stimulates the mass to vibrate. Longitudinal guides prevent the mass from vibrating in the transverse direction. Via the spring, the test force acts on the specimen. By varying the excitation frequency of the imbalance, the test force can be controlled. In our case, the specimen is loaded with about 25 cycles per second.
So if it is 25 cycles per second, means it is 25 hertz. Okay.
Sudhakara,
Yeah.
just a quick question. Sorry, I missed the beginning. So that's all under the oh my God, what's the name? Not the elastic deformation limit.
Yeah, the elastic limit, it doesn't play any role in fatigue life because the material will fail at the load which is far very inferior to the elastic limit. Okay. Here the material will fail just to 40% of yield strength. But over a period of time, it will take the failure will not be insidious, it will not be immediate, it will fail over a period of time.
Oh, okay, but the maximum tension there is all in the elastic zone.
Yeah, everything will be in the elastic zone. Everything will be in the elastic zone. Yeah.
Okay, think of it. No, because on our equipment here we have a simulation of failure, right? But it's because it deforms. It's a tubing which is coiled in a drum, and then you have to uncoil it, straight it up, and then coil it back, and then you have a simulator for that failure. But it goes under plastic deformation.
Yeah, actually, what I'm talking right now is high cycle fatigue. Okay, so in high cycle fatigue, we'll keep everything in the elastic region. Okay, but if we go for a low cycle fatigue, that means we can go to the plastic region also. There are different kind of fatigue analysis. We have a low cycle fatigue, we have a high cycle fatigue, and similarly, as per the testing is concerned, as testing setup is concerned, we have a stress controlled fatigue testing, we have a strain controlled fatigue testing. So we have different things. What I am talking right now is stress controlled and high cycle fatigue. Okay, so for this only, this SN curve, this elastic regime, everything will apply. Are you clear?
Okay, clear. Thank you, Sudhakara.
Thank you. So this how we can have some time. You can see the second video, which is tension fatigue, and that particular video will have more basics of fatigue also. You can have good idea about it. Okay. So right now, another important thing we are going to see right now is factors affecting the fatigue life. Okay. So what are the factors have a strong influence over the fatigue life of the material? So for a common loading situation, the maximum stress within the component or structures occurs at the surface. Okay, only the surface are very prone to the fatigue failure because the maximum stress will be occurring at the surface alone. That means maximum stress is nothing but the stress caused due to the flaws or defects. Okay, so if the surface is having a improper arrangement or roughness is there, that roughness will also act as a stress concentration, and that will reduce the fatigue life drastically. That's what the surface roughness is saying. Okay, so one fine example, you can see a type of finish and corresponding surface roughness of the finish, and what is the fatigue life of that particular finish. That's what is shown in this particular table. So if the material is lathe form, the surface roughness will be around 105 micro inches. Okay, it is in inches, not in meters. So it is 105 micro inches. For this particular surface roughness, the fatigue life of this component could be around 24,000 cycle. For the different kind of finish, for example, ground and polished, the surface roughness will be 2 micro inches. For this particular surface roughness, obviously the fatigue life will get drastically increased. It will be around 234,000 cycle, 234,000 cycle. Okay. So this how the surface roughness influences the fatigue life of the material. Then surface property. So I hope you all could have come across the terms called carburizing, nitriding. So it's nothing but changing the property of the surface, increasing the hardness of the surface. If I do so, definitely the fatigue life will get increased or it will be getting affected. We cannot come to a conclusion that it will increase or decrease. Definitely it will have some effect over the fatigue life of the material. Okay. Then another one is surface residual stresses. I hope you all know what is called a residual stresses. Residual stresses are nothing but the stresses which remain in the material even after the process is done, even after completing the process. Okay, so what are all the sources of residual stresses? Yes, residual stresses can be intentionally imparted in the material surface by the process like laser peening, shot peening. So these are all the process. And I would like to say one thing, because my PhD is based on this residual stresses and surface enhancement using the shot peening and laser peening. That's my PhD. Okay, so this residual stresses are positive at the same time negative also. It can give you more positive effect, at the same time it can give you a negative effect. What matters is what is the nature of the residual stress. If the residual stress is tensile in the nature, definitely it will determinate or deteriorate your material fatigue life. If it is compressive in nature, it will enhance the material fatigue life. So what is happening means, if it is tensile in nature, just imagine, if it is tensile in nature, then the material is having minus 400 MPa locally in the surface as a residual stress in the material surface. Okay, if it is having it's a plus 400 MPa if it is tensile in nature. So you are applying a material to a 700 MPa of external stress. So what will happen locally? That 700 MPa and that 400 MPa will add together. Okay, that will overlap. So definitely that particular region will face a 1100 MPa. Okay, then material will fail very fast. The crack will initiate very quickly and the material will fail fast. That's what will happen if the residual stress is tensile in nature. What will happen if the tensile residual stress is compressive in nature? It will have minus 400 MPa in the surface. And if I subject that material to the external load of 700 MPa, then if it overlaps, then only 300 MPa will be felt at that particular point. Then definitely the material will not fail, and the crack initiation will get postponed. So the material will give a good fatigue life. That's what is the theory behind the compressive and tensile residual stresses. Okay, so one fine example here, I hope you all know the effect of notch in the material fatigue life. Definitely, if there is a notch, then the crack initiation will be immediately happen because of the stress concentration, and the material will fail. Obviously, it will have a very premature failure. Okay, so what happened here is, there is a nickel chromium alloy. Can you see the graph right now? Just give me a moment. Yeah. So this is a nickel chromium alloy, which is notched. It has a fatigue life like this. Okay. So it is failing with this particular very low stress itself. It is failing like this. Okay. So I am getting this band for the notched nickel chromium alloy. When I am subjecting this notched nickel chromium alloy to a shot peening, or when I'm imparting some residual compressive stress in that notched alloy, what is happening? The fatigue stress, the fatigue limit is increased. Okay, from here to here, and it is comparable to the polished and smooth nickel chromium alloy. The fatigue limit and fatigue behavior of the notched short peened alloy is almost equal to the smooth and polished alloy. Just imagine the drastic effect of notch can be compensated by the short peen. That's how it is effective. Okay, so this is one fine example for the effect of surface residual stress on the fatigue life of the material. So mean stress, I hope you all know what is mean stress. When I subject a material to particular, first initially what you will do, for example, for a minus R is equal to 0.3 stress, what we have to do, if you put all this calculation which I have shown there, I'll tell you in a very common way, in a very, very easy way. So if I want to do a fatigue testing at R is equal to 0.3, okay, then it is a positive stress ratio. So definitely the entire thing will happen in the tension side. Okay, then only if I go for sigma minimum and sigma maximum, minus will cancel, I'll get a positive stress ratio. So what I'm going to supposed to do, I'm going to apply a tensile stress to the material initially, a normal monotonic stress. Okay, I'll take the material to a 200 MPa. Just imagine like this. I'm taking a material to a 200 MPa, and then I'm imposing a maximum and minimum stress from there. So it will go to 200 to 500 and 200 to minus 200. Okay, like this. Okay, so the 200 remains constant. That is a mean stress, about which the minimum and maximum is going up and down. That's what is called a mean stress. So if I increase that mean stress, what will happen? Definitely the material will fail before. The stress, the number of cycle will get reduced with the increase in mean stress. That's what is the effect of mean stresses. Okay, I don't want to read this. I'll just explain you what it's all about. And this one fine example, if I have a sigma M3 is greater than sigma M2 and sigma M2 is greater than sigma M1, the SN curve will be, you will get a SN curve like this. Sigma 1 is very less, so that I will get a very good fatigue life. And sigma M2 is little higher than that, so that I'm getting a little inferior to the sigma 1. And similarly, sigma M3 will be lesser than the sigma 1. Okay, is that fine?
Yes.
Okay. Please stop me if I'm going very fast. I don't know whether you're following me or not. Okay. So right now, the time is 5 o'clock. Can I continue? Is that okay? Another 10 minutes maybe.
Of course, sure.
Thank you. So we are going to see, let me recapitulate very quickly. So what we have done right now, we have started with what is fatigue, importance of fatigue we have seen, and then how the fatigue failure happens. We started with crack nucleation, crack growth, everything. We have seen that. And then how the fatigue is evaluated and represented. We have seen that also. And then what are all the testing methods? We have seen that also. And right now, what we are going to see is we are going to see how the fatigue is post-analyzed. That means how the fatigue failures are post-mortem. So after failure, what all the things has to be noted down, and what is the importance of it? That's what we are going to see right now. It is nothing but a fractography of the fatigue failure. Okay, and in other ways, I think I don't want to read that. What is that? Portugal lane. I don't want to take a risk. Okay, this is microscopical aspects of the fatigue failure. So even no engineers are required to explain this photograph. So here the crack is get originated and the crack is grown in this region, which is nothing but the fatigue zone. Oh, just give me a moment. Okay, here the crack is originated and here the fatigue crack is grown. So it is a fatigue zone. And this is a final fracture where the cross-sectional area of the material is not enough to bear the load. So definitely there will be immediate failure. The final failure happened here. Okay. So this is, let me tell you one by one. We have a very important characteristic which is nothing but the calm shell or beach marking. Okay. It is nothing but if the crack growth is intermittent. Okay. For example, you are running the machine at the night and you are stopping the machine till the next day. Like for example, today morning 8 to evening 5 o'clock, the machine is running and you are stopping it and you are going to your home. The next day, the same operator is coming and operating the machine from morning 8 to 5. So what is happening? The crack is not continuously growing. The crack is growing intermittently. So when it is stopped, that crack growth will create a mark that will leave a footprint. Okay. That footprint is nothing but the calm shell marking. Okay. So I don't want to read everything. This what is the concept is. You can read it maybe later. So can you see that? Can you see the
Yes.
ring marks? So it is nothing but the sign of intermittent crack growth. Okay. So fatigue striations. Fatigue striations also look similar to the calm shell marking, but it is totally different. So as I said before, calm shell marking is nothing but the sign of intermittent crack growth. Fatigue striations is nothing but the footprint left by the crack for each and every advancement. Okay, for each and every cycle of fatigue, the crack will advance. Am I right? Obviously, the crack should grow. So when it is growing for each and every cycles, it will leave a footprint. So that is nothing but the fatigue striations. I hope you understand. So as I said before, there will be millions of cycles. Millions of cycles will be incorporated or imposed on a material during the fatigue testing. So I cannot see the striation. There will be technically or theoretically, there should be millions of striations. Okay, so if there is a millions of striations, definitely you cannot see it with your naked eyes. Then you need some scanning electron microscopy or other aids to understand or to absorb the striations. Okay, so that's what I've explained in words. Phatic striations typically occur only after many thousands of float cycles. It is clearly slow growth advances in microscopic distance per cycle. So, and from the striation spacing itself, we can roughly calculate whether how the crack is advanced, whether it is cracked, the resistance of the material is very strong for the crack advancement, or the material is very soft and giving way to the crack drastically. All this information can get roughly out of phatic striations. Okay. So equally spaced, because see, in laboratory, obviously the sigma A is constant, the amplitude stress is constant, and mean stress is constant. So definitely the striations will be equally spaced in laboratory, but not in that is not the same case if you find a specimen which is in a service. If it is failed, if you analyze that, it won't look like that. You may not find the striations also. There are many things, there are many opportunities for the striations to get rubbed off, or else some materials will not show the striations itself. Okay, so but in engineering, phatic striations varies due to the variable loading. Striations, COMSOL markings are not only the fracture, or that's another important point. Not only fatigue will show this, wherever the crack initiates, grow, everywhere this kind of things can be found. So for example, stress corrosion cracking, hydrogen embrittlement can also show this kind of features. Striation spacing denotes a slow crack advances. So if the crack advances relatively large, striations and other features never form. Am I right? So if it is closely forming, you can find the striations. If the crack is propagating very fast, then definitely you cannot find the footprint. So one striation will be here, the other striation will be somewhere that side. Okay, so definitely you cannot notice it. Okay, so in such cases, large cracks are interlinked and form a ductile failure kind of fracture. So the entire surface will look different. These are all not applicable for all kind of material. Not all situation you can see the COMSOL marking and the striations. But this is a very important little tricky to understand. Okay, but this is a very important feature of the phatic fractography. So this is another important for me actually. This is my research. So it is a square sample, like a rectangular cross-section sample. In this rectangular cross-section sample is subjected to a new tension fatigue. Okay, in this tension fatigue, the material failed in this way. So the crack initiated in the smaller edge. That crack initiation site is clearly seen, and then I have found a striation in this region. So that one is magnified here, and I have shown the striations. You can see the striations. So as I said before, it is a laboratory tested. So the striations are equally spaced. Okay, and this is the final fracture region, and this is nothing but the shear lip. I hope you would have come across the shear lip and other stuffs in the tensile failure. Okay, so it is another cylindrical sample. This is also from my research. So here the phatic crack initiated in the surface in one case. You can see the crack initiation in this area, and the crack propagates towards the core of the sample. And similarly here also some inclusion initiated the crack, and then here also the crack travels towards the core. Obviously it should travel, right? So here the crack initiated in the subsurface region. So this is the crack initiated region, and the crack propagated to the away from the crack initiated site, nucleated site. Okay, so it is a short pinned sample, so that the surface is hardened, surface compressed residual stress, so the crack doesn't form here. The crack initiated in the subsurface region. That's what is my observation. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for your time. I think your patience also.
Thank you, Sudhakar.
Yeah, if you have any doubt, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sudhakar.
Thank you, Sudhakar.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, just give me a moment. Yeah. Yeah, now the session is open for questions and answers. Please ask if you have any doubts If you have any idea of working in fatigue, please ask me. We will work together. No problem. Yeah. You have any doubts? Not only doubts, if you have any feedback, please give me. Let me implement in the next class. So if you don't have any doubts, you can leave. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhakar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.